It's really amazing how over the past couple of weeks, I've really started to fall in love with Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Although the game is a couple of years old now, and I'm only just getting around now to doing everything in it and experiencing all the content, haven't touched the DLC yet, but having experienced some of the game's critical moments, especially Senna's side story, has really made me realize that in certain ways, this specific title is absolutely one of the greatest of all time. Right? You can argue this isn't the best RPG on Switch. You can argue this isn't the best Xenoblade game. A lot of that is up to personal preference. But when it comes to objective, great character writing and fantastic send-offs to characters, I don't think any game I've ever played in my life does it as well as Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And the absolute best example of that, by far, is Senna's Hero Quest, in which Shania returns and gives a lot of shocking character depth to an antagonist that we had already thought was dead, done and dusted for good. To me, this side story exceeds everything else in the game. It far surpasses every other storyline. It comes together beautifully, and honestly, if an entire game was written like this would be, hands down, the most well-written RPG ever made, by far. Unfortunately, the game has too many ups and downs in its writing to really consider that to be the case for the game as a whole, but it really needs to be understood that this might be the most heart-wrenching thing I've ever seen in my life. If you haven't played this game, go out and do it now. If you're the sort of person that stopped after 20 hours in, go back to it because it really does come together in a big way later on. As you spend more and more time with the characters and really understand the setting better and understand what the game is trying to say, it becomes an absolute masterpiece. But what makes Shania such an incredible antagonist is how much time the developer spent in building her up as a force to be reckoned with. The character is introduced as being just a generic grunt in the Lost Numbers. You get a little bit of insight into her background and personality. She has some kind of relationship with Gondor, one of the major characters in the second half of the game. And the more you interact with her, the more you learn about her, the more you start to realize that something is afoot. Something is seriously wrong with this girl. And it becomes more and more obvious as you play through the game that she's going to do something reprehensible. She's going to do something abominably terrible. And she does. What ends up happening is that as a member of the Lost Numbers, the only free civilization in Ionis, which is completely independent of both Agnes and Kevis, Shania decides to betray her own and go over to the antagonist of Mobius in a desperate attempt to insert herself into the endless cycle between Agnes and Kevis. The reasons she does so aren't immediately clear. Her claim is that her life is so miserable and that she detests everyone around her so much that she is willing to undermine everything the city stands for in order to simply lash out at them. These motivations are very similar to other members of Mobius, specifically Yorin, who has this similar contemptuous view of other people because they can't relate to his inability to contribute anything to the cause. Yorin, although Noah, Uni, and Lance are legitimately good friends with him, ends up resenting them because of his own physical inadequacies. And as a result of that, becomes very violent and unhinged and becomes a major antagonist for that reason. Yorin, after the events of the game conclude, eventually goes through a sort of redemption where he accepts that what he did was wrong, and he begins to feel some remorse. That is not the case with Shania. Not only does Shania try and kill the entire population of the city through her own actions, she comes back to life and tries to do it again. Shania was a monster even before she becomes Mobius. And in a sense, becoming Mobius only at that point, like, she's just doing what she did when she was a normal person again. Having been denied her wish of being reincarnated, instead being risen up as a console, Shania takes the opportunity. The first thing she does is immediately return to the city and immediately use everything in her power to lash out at everyone around her. It takes the entire party and Gondor to put her down. To me, Shania is such an interesting character because the game really accurately depicts what it's like for someone to be pushed to the edge and then to just snap. Right? Shania put in all this effort to become a soldier, to become part of Ouroboros, to serve the city, and what ends up happening? Everyone ends up spitting in her face. You know, her mother especially, but it doesn't make her life better. You know, all that effort, all that work, and it all just goes up in smoke. And she resents everyone for it, especially Gondor. And initially, when you go through like the prison section, when you meet Gondor for the first time and you learn about their prior friendship, it's really easy to see why Gondor might have antagonized Shania. Gondor is a very, very aggressive personality. Someone who's very foul-mouthed and very willing to call people out on even like the smallest slight. Gondor is a hard person to get along with. And Shania seems like the kind of person who would take what Gondor says to her very, very seriously. She was very jealous of Gondor. Gondor did everything she wanted to do. And in the end, the revelation, the big thing that really makes this side story such a big, heart-wrenching thing is that when you actually see the full context of what actually happened between them, you begin to realize that Gondor is actually Shania's best friend. She absolutely had her best interests at heart. She was trying to steer her on the best path in her own way. Like, she was telling her that the military life wasn't right for her and that she should pursue her actual talent of being an artist. And what ends up happening? Shania refuses to face reality, to face the fact that she isn't really cut out to be a soldier, and begins to loathe Gondor for her kindness and everything that she did for her. And Gondor, in turn, begins to detest Shania because of all the things she does, for not taking her genuinely good advice at heart. And you begin to realize that, yes, Shania did have a terrible life. Her mom was a bitch. Okay? Fuck her mom. But when you really, really look at the character and her history, as terrible as it all was, it wasn't that much different than what everyone else went through. Shania likes to think she's special. She likes to think she's this broken person. She wants everyone to suffer as she's suffered. But the reality is, she simply can't accept the fact. She simply can't deal with her own personal problems. She pushed away the one person who had her best interests at heart to LARP as a supervillain. And for what? So she dies twice? Like, Shania let everything positive in her life go in order to lash out at people that she felt had wronged her. When you really think about it in that context, when you realize in this sense that Shania did have a lot of opportunities, she did have people that cared about her, like all that nonsense she goes on about how nobody loved me, man, like it was all just a big gigantic cope. The reality of the situation is that Shania didn't want to be fixed. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to lash out at other people. She wanted to be malicious. And when that failed, when even that didn't work, she became even more sinister and even more depraved and kept pushing and pushing to the point where Gondor, her one and only friend, had to put her down personally. So when you really look at this sequence, when you really see it play out, when you really just see what it means for the characters and for the story, what you get is this absolute tragic tale of someone who couldn't accept the fact that she had to get over her own problems, right? Lashing out at other people, becoming immortal, being reincarnated, none of that would have fixed her core problem, right? That she was a stupid bitch who couldn't contribute to society in any meaningful way. She couldn't face facts. She couldn't do what needed to be done to fix her problems, right? She instead decided to blame other people. And for me, considering the extent she goes to in order to live out this LARP as if like she's some tragic misunderstood villain, to me, this is what makes Shania one of the most evil characters in all of video games, if not the most evil. Because nothing she did had any point to it. It was simply this girl throwing a temper tantrum. No, mommy, I could have made the top 6. I could have joined Ouroboros. No, you weren't good enough. Gondor doesn't think so. The judges didn't think so. Even your fucking mom didn't think so. Because you're a stupid bitch. Like, Shania is a completely reprehensible person, and that's what makes her such a compelling villain. She really showcases the mindset you have to be in to turn your back on society in this way. Like, what exactly are you accomplishing by killing a bunch of people for no reason? She is the anime equivalent of like a school shooter. Like, she thinks this gives her power over other people. She thinks this is somehow going to change her life and make her like have control over her situation. But in reality, she's complete scum. Nothing she does serves any purpose, and it's just out of this malicious intent to get back at people who really didn't mean her any harm to begin with. Not the judges, not anybody else in the city, and especially not Gondor, her best and only friend.